If you've walked down Oxford Street lately, you've probably noticed something feels off. Empty storefronts where major brands used to be? Fewer shopping bags, less energy? For decades, this was one of the most famous shopping streets in the world, pulling in over 500,000 visitors on busy days. But things have changed dramatically. Debenhams closed its flagship Oxford Street store in 2021 after 142 years. That's not just a store closure, that's the end of an era. Topshop's massive location, once a destination for fashion shoppers from across Europe, shut down the same year. House of Fraser, Marks & Spencer, and even John Lewis have either closed stores or seriously scaled back operations in the area. The street that defined British retail is losing its anchor tenants one by one. When I visited recently, I counted at least 15 empty units just between Marble Arch and Tottenham Court Road. Some have been vacant for over 2 years. The ones that are still open often feel quiet, even on weekends. Staff outnumber customers in stores that used to have queues at the tills. It's eerie walking through what's supposed to be one of the busiest retail districts in Europe and feeling like you're in a half-abandoned shopping center. What makes it worse is that Oxford Street isn't some random high street. This is central London. This is where tourists come. This is where the world sees British commerce. And it's struggling badly. The British Retail Consortium reported that footfall across central London was still down nearly 20% compared to pre-pandemic levels as of late 2024. Oxford Street took one of the hardest hits. Retailers blame high business rates, rising rents, and the shift to online shopping. But there's something deeper happening here. The entire model of city center retail is being questioned. If Oxford Street, with all its history and global recognition, can't survive in its current form, what does that say about the rest of London's center? The cracks are showing, and they're getting wider. This isn't just about empty shops. It's about what comes next. London's city center was built on one massive assumption. People work in offices, thousands of them, packed into towers from the City of London to Canary Wharf. But that world is disappearing fast, and the impact is bigger than most people realize. During the pandemic, central London became a ghost town. Office workers stayed home, and many never fully came back. Hybrid working became the new standard. Companies that used to demand 5 days in the office now accept 2 or 3. Some went fully remote. The latest data from the Office for National Statistics shows that only about 45% of London workers are back in the office full-time. That's a permanent shift, not a temporary blip. I walked through the City of London on a Tuesday afternoon in late 2024. The streets around Bank and Liverpool Street used to be packed at lunchtime. Now they're noticeably quieter. Pret-a-manger locations that once had lines out the door are half empty. The sandwich shops, coffee chains, dry cleaners, and gyms that relied on office workers are all feeling the squeeze. Some have already closed. Major companies are rethinking their London presence entirely. HSBC announced plans to cut its office space significantly. Google delayed its new King's Cross headquarters expansion. Meta scaled back. Even the UK government is consolidating office space and selling off buildings. When your biggest employers are shrinking their footprint, that's a problem for the entire ecosystem. What people don't always connect is how much of London's economy depends on office workers just being there. It's not just about rent paid by corporations. It's about the father meal deals, the after-work pints, the theater tickets, the taxis, the everything. When office attendance drops by half, all of that revenue drops too. Transport for London is already reporting massive shortfalls because fewer people are buying daily travel cards and using the tube during peak hours. This isn't a phase. Companies have realized they can operate with less physical space, and they're not going back. The question now is what happens to all those office buildings and the businesses that depended on them. You can have the nicest shops and the best restaurants, but if people don't feel safe, they won't come. And right now, London's city center has a serious perception problem when it comes to crime and safety. Theft and shoplifting have skyrocketed across central London. The British Retail Consortium reported that incidents of violence and abuse against retail workers increased by 50% in 2023. Major stores on Oxford Street have had to hire extra security. Some have even installed panic buttons for staff. I spoke to workers at several shops who said they deal with shoplifters almost daily, and there's little police can do because the thieves know they'll likely just get a warning. It's not just shoplifting. There's been a noticeable increase in antisocial behavior around major stations like King's Cross, Victoria, and Liverpool Street. Aggressive begging, public drug use, and intimidation have become more common. Tourists and locals alike mention feeling less comfortable walking through certain parts of the center, especially at night. Westminster Council data shows rough sleeping increased by over 30% between 2022 and 2024 in the West End alone. The Metropolitan Police are stretched thin. Budget cuts and staffing shortages mean fewer officers on the beat in central areas. Response times have gotten slower. When I visited Leicester Square on a Friday evening, I saw one police presence in over 2 hours. That's not enough for an area that used to be heavily patrolled. Social media hasn't helped. Videos of incidents, thefts, and confrontations in central London go viral regularly, creating a feedback loop that makes the city look more dangerous than the statistics might suggest. But perception matters. If people think it's not safe, they'll avoid it, which means less foot traffic, which means businesses suffer, which means more closures and more empty spaces that attract more antisocial behavior. The West End used to feel vibrant and safe at all hours. Now, even locals think twice about certain routes after dark. That's a massive shift, and it's driving people away from the center. London's transport system is the backbone of the city center. Without the tube, buses, and overground, the whole thing collapses. But Transport for London is in serious financial trouble, and that's creating a vicious cycle that's strangling the heart of the city. Before the pandemic, TfL was almost financially self-sufficient, funded mostly by fares. Then COVID hit, and ridership disappeared overnight. The government stepped in with emergency funding, but that money came with conditions, and it's running out. By 2024, TfL was facing a funding gap of over $500 million annually. They've had to make brutal choices, freeze major projects, delay maintenance, and cut services. The Elizabeth Line was supposed to transform east-west travel across London, and it has to some extent. But other planned upgrades have been shelved. The Bakerloo Line extension? Cancelled. Upgrades to aging infrastructure? Delayed. When I rode the Northern Line recently, the trains were old, crowded, and unreliable. Delays are more common than they used to be. Signal failures, track problems, and overcrowding during the limited peak hours are routine. Fares keep going up. TfL has increased prices nearly every year since 2020, trying to cover the shortfall. A Zone 1 to 2 daily cap now costs over $8. For workers coming in just 2 or 3 days a week, that adds up fast, and it's another reason people avoid the commute. Contactless payment has made it easier to track costs, and people are realizing just how expensive it is to get into central London regularly. The bus network is being cut too. Several routes through central London have been reduced or eliminated entirely. Night buses, which were essential for shift workers and nightlife, have seen major reductions. Fewer buses mean longer waits, more crowding, and less reliable service, which pushes people toward cars or staying out of the center altogether. Without a properly funded, efficient transport system, the city center can't function, and right now, TfL is stuck in a doom loop. Fewer riders mean less money, which means worse service, which means even fewer riders. Here's something most people miss. London's housing crisis isn't just a problem for residents, it's directly killing the city center. When the people who make the city run can't afford to live anywhere near it, the whole system breaks down. Central London rents are insane. A one-bedroom flat in Zone 1 or Zone 2 easily runs $2,000 to $3,000 per month. Even a tiny studio can cost $1,500. The people who work in shops, restaurants, hotels, and services, the ones who actually keep the center functioning, can't afford those prices, so they're being pushed further and further out to Zone 4, 5, or beyond. Some are leaving London entirely. That means longer commutes, which makes jobs in central London less attractive. Why work in a West End restaurant for $12 an hour when your commute costs $300 a month and takes 2 hours each way? Hospitality businesses across the center are reporting severe staff shortages. I talked to a manager at a restaurant near Covent Garden who said they've had to reduce opening hours because they literally can't find enough staff willing to make the journey. At the same time, there's barely any new housing being built in central boroughs. Westminster, Camden, and the city have strict planning rules and massive resistance to development. The housing that does get built is luxury flats marketed to foreign investors, not key workers. Buildings sit empty as investments, while actual Londoners are priced out. The lack of affordable housing also means fewer families living in the center. Schools are closing in inner London boroughs because there aren't enough children. Neighborhoods that used to have a mix of residents, workers, and visitors are becoming sterile office and tourist zones with no real community. And when there's no community, there's no reason for local businesses to thrive. This creates another doom loop. High costs drive workers away. Businesses can't staff properly. Service quality drops. Customers have worse experiences, and fewer people want to visit the center. It all connects back to housing. London's nightlife used to be legendary. The West End, Soho, Shoreditch. These were places where the city came alive after dark. But that culture is dying, and the city center is becoming duller and less attractive as a result. Over 400 nightclubs have closed across London since 2015. Iconic venues like Fabric nearly shut down permanently. The Astoria, Turnmills, Madame Jojo's, all gone. Smaller pubs and live music venues are closing at an alarming rate, too. The mayor's office reported that London loses an average of one pub per week. These aren't just businesses, they're cultural institutions that give the city its character. The reasons are predictable. Rising rents, business rates, noise complaints from new luxury flat developments, and licensing restrictions. Developers build expensive apartments next to existing venues. Then residents complain about the noise, and the venue gets forced out. It's happened again and again. Gentrification is killing the very culture that made those areas desirable in the first place. I visited Soho on a Saturday night recently. Dean Street and Old Compton Street still have some energy, but it's nothing like it used to be. Half the bars close by midnight now. The late-night crowd has thinned out. There's less spontaneity, less edge, less of what made London's nightlife special. A lot of the venues that remain feel corporate and sanitized, nothing like the grimy, creative spaces that define the scene. Theater is struggling too. The West End is one of London's biggest tourist draws, but ticket sales have been inconsistent since the pandemic. Many shows are offering deep discounts just to fill seats. Smaller fringe theaters, the ones that develop new talent and take creative risks, are closing because they can't cover costs. When nightlife and culture decline, the city center loses its soul. It becomes just another business district that people avoid after 6 p.m. That's not London. That's not what makes this city special. One of the biggest reasons businesses are fleeing London's center is something most people never think about: business rates. It's a uniquely British problem, and it's absolutely crushing small and medium-sized businesses across the city. Business rates are a tax based on the rental value of a property. In central London, where property values are astronomical, the rates are brutal. A small shop on Oxford Street can pay over $100,000 per year just in business rates, before rent, before staff, before stock. For many businesses, it's their second or third largest expense. And unlike other costs, you can't negotiate it down. You either pay or you close. The system hasn't been properly reformed in decades. It's based on property valuations that don't reflect the current reality of retail. A shop that's struggling to survive is still being taxed as if it's thriving just because it's in a prime location. The government has promised reform for years, but nothing meaningful has happened. Instead, rates keep going up. I spoke to a cafe owner near King's Cross who's been there for 15 years. He said his business rates have nearly doubled since 2019, while his customer numbers have dropped by 40%. He's barely breaking even, and he's not alone. Independent businesses across the center are being squeezed out by a tax system that was designed for a different era. Large chains can absorb these costs better, but even they're struggling. That's why you're seeing so many closures on major shopping streets. When the economics don't work, businesses leave. And when they leave, the empty units make the area less attractive, which drives down foot traffic, which makes it even harder for remaining businesses to survive. What makes it worse is that online retailers don't pay anything close to the same level of tax. Amazon, ASOS, and other online giants have massive advantages because they're not saddled with the same property-based tax burden. The system is literally pushing customers away from physical stores and toward online shopping, which kills city center retail even faster. Reform is desperately needed, but it's not coming fast enough to save many of the businesses currently on the edge. Let's talk about what London's city centre could look like if these trends continue. It's not pretty, but it's important to understand where this is heading. More empty storefronts are inevitable. If business rates don't change, rents don't drop, and foot traffic doesn't recover, we'll see even more closures on Oxford Street, Bond Street, Regent Street, and every other major retail area. Those empty units will sit vacant for years because landlords would rather keep them empty than lower rents and reset the market value of their properties. It's already happening. Office buildings will be converted or left empty. Some are already being turned into residential flats, which sounds good in theory, but most conversions are luxury apartments that don't address the affordability crisis. Many older office buildings can't be easily converted, so they'll just sit there, empty and decaying, contributing nothing to the local economy. Public services will continue to decline. If TfL doesn't get stable funding, the transport network will get worse, trains will be older, delays will be more common, and fares will keep rising. That makes the center even less accessible, which drives more people away. It's a death spiral. Crime and antisocial behavior will likely increase. Empty buildings and quiet streets attract more problems, not fewer. If there aren't enough people around, if businesses keep closing, if police resources stay stretched thin, the perception of safety will get worse, and once that perception sets in, it's incredibly hard to reverse. The city center could become a tale of two worlds: ultra-luxury zones where only the very wealthy can afford to shop, eat, and live, and declining areas that everyone else avoids. That's not a functional city. That's urban decay with a designer handbag. Tourism might hold steady for major landmarks, Big Ben, Tower Bridge, Buckingham Palace, but the areas in between could hollow out. Tourists come to London for the energy, the culture, the shopping. If that's gone, they'll spend less time and less money, which hurts the entire economy. Here's the question everyone should be asking: can this be reversed, or is London's city centre doomed to decline? The answer is complicated, but there are things that could make a real difference if they actually happen. First, business rates need radical reform. The current system is killing retail and hospitality. A tax based on revenue or profit instead of property value would be fairer and more sustainable. Germany and other European countries have different models that don't punish businesses just for being in expensive locations. The UK could learn from them, but this requires political will, and so far, that's been lacking. Second, Transport for London needs stable, long-term funding. The city centre can't function without reliable, affordable transport. That means either higher government subsidies, new revenue sources like road pricing, or both. It's not a popular conversation, but it's necessary. A well-funded transport system brings people into the center, which supports businesses, which creates jobs, which funds more transport. It's a positive cycle, but it has to start somewhere. Third, housing policy has to change. Central London needs genuinely affordable housing for key workers, not luxury investment flats. That means overriding local planning objections, building higher density developments, and possibly rent controls in certain areas. It's politically difficult, but without it, the workforce that keeps the center running will keep moving further away. Fourth, crime and safety have to be addressed visibly. More police on the beat, better lighting, cleaner streets, and proactive support for rough sleepers instead of just moving them along. People need to feel safe, and that requires resources and commitment. Fifth, culture and nightlife need protection. Venues should have legal protection from noise complaints if they were there first. Business rates for cultural venues could be reduced. Planning laws could prioritize creative spaces over luxury. Flats. London's culture is an economic asset, not a luxury. Protecting it makes financial sense. Is any of this likely to happen fast enough? Honestly, probably not. Change in London moves slowly, and there are too many competing interests. But the alternative is watching one of the world's great cities hollow out from the center. That's not inevitable, but it's the path we're on right now. Whether London's center collapses or recovers depends on decisions being made today. Thank you for watching. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My wife said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. But I believe stories about London and the reality of the United Kingdom like this deserve to be told. Help me show her that these videos matter. Please subscribe to the channel and let's keep these stories from being ignored.